The Hunger Games makes its return after 8 years off the big screen with The Hunger Games, The Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. This film stars Rachel Zegler of West Side Story fame and Tom Blyth. It is a story that tells the origins of the Hunger Games and tells the origins of the antagonist of the Hunger Games, President Snow. Tom Blyth plays Snow in this film. It is 10 years into the Hunger Games experience. Audiences are starting to fall out of interest in it, and thus it is up to this young student to essentially reinvent the Hunger Games and get people to care about it again. Rachel Zegler plays Lucy Gray, a character that is the rebellious symbol of the Hunger Games, and it ends up becoming a story of true star-crossed lovers in Snow and Lucy. And it is, again, the exploration of how Snow becomes the antagonist that we know him to be 65 years later in the Hunger Games. The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes offers a really interesting premise, one that I had no clue going into this movie. I did not know what this movie was about. I did not know that it was going to be an origin story of President Snow. As someone who has found themselves a casual fan of the Hunger Games series throughout the past decade, however, never really closely engaged with the material, I went into this movie skeptical, hoping that I would enjoy it, also knowing that it was 2 hours and 40 minutes. Walking out of the theater, I am glad to say that I had a lot of fun with this new Hunger Games movies, and I think that is largely due to the performances. Tom Blyth and Rachel Zegler are extremely good in their respective roles. I believe their chemistry, and I think that is the most important thing when talking about this YA adaptation. The aspect that works best about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is this political intrigue in the character of Snow. Snow is this person who you can see wants to rise above. He wants to have this education. He wants and seeks power. And thus, he is suggesting new ways to get people to buy into the Hunger Games. But he's also not the antagonist that we know him. He is a much softer, he seems like a much kinder person. He even seems slightly against the idea of there being a Hunger Games at all. When he meets this character of Lucy, played by Zegler, you see him start to form this connection with her. And as the events go on, you see their relationship form. And that is when the movie is at its best, when it is exploring Snow's character both in a relationship and as a political figure, a Machiavellian prince of sorts. Where this movie falls apart is in its third act, when this movie has to kind of shift into how does Snow become the Snow we know him to be 65 years later. And that's where the storytelling takes a huge, massive dip. For the first two acts of this movie, I found the political intrigue and the romance of this to work. I thought the world building did a good job at just bringing me back into the world of Fanan, and it also did an exceptional job introducing this young version of Snow and everything that is intriguing about him as a character. As the film goes into the third act and really does have to become kind of set up, it does kind of yada yada its way through big key moments. And by the time you're left at the end, you're kind of left wondering what happened and how this character became who we know him to be. With that all said, I do not believe any of the blame falls on the actors. Tom Blyth as Snow is extremely good. In fact, I think he is exceptionally great in this movie. I think he is able to portray much of the darker tendencies and confliction of Snow just by the expressions on his face. I think his chemistry with Zegler is really good. Zegler is a very different protagonist from the Jennifer Lawrence Katniss character. She is far more feisty. She is a lot more funny. She is a folk singer. So Zegler is able to use her musical theater training into this movie. Now, this musical theater element of her performance may come off as annoying and grating to some people. I thought it worked within the context of this movie with this character of Lucy being the rebellion symbolization. The performances in this movie are overall good. There is a really strong supporting cast that includes Hunter Schafer as Tigris, Peter Dinklage as this headmaster slash teacher, and Viola Davis, who is the one that it seems to be is behind The Hunger Games. Peter Dinklage is asked to do his Game of Thrones character, which he can do in his sleep. He can do that character for a reason, and that's all they ask him to do, but he does that well. Viola Davis is a mixed bag for me. I thought she went really over the top, and she's also Viola Davis, which means when she needs to be really scary, she is really scary in certain scenes as the antagonist of this story. The person who I found to be best in the supporting cast was Jason Schwartzman. He plays the announcer of the Hunger Games. He also kind of plays this news anchor. He's very cheesy. He's very funny. His one lines are consistently good. And the second act, when we are in the Hunger Games, is when this movie is at its peak. Francis Lawrence, who is a director that I believe added energy into Catching Fire post the first film not being so great, is able to up his style in this movie. I think this is his best directed of the Hunger Games movies. I think the close atmosphere of the Hunger Games in this movie, the hand to hand combat, I found that all to work very well. It is also the issue with Francis Lawrence that I believe he adapts the source material too closely. And by adapting the source material too closely, there is too much to follow in the book that ends up becoming just lost within the narrative focus of this movie. I wish he had more choice to choose and pick and decide and edit what stays and what doesn't, but he is juggling just too much in this movie. And especially as we get into the third act of this movie, where there are certain character beats that are supposed to happen that we're supposed to buy into for this character of Snow, we don't fully buy into them, and it brings the movie down. At 2 hours and 40 minutes, this movie is both too long and also not long enough. It just doesn't really get to accomplish everything that it needs to. However, with that all said, I enjoyed this movie. Of all the YA movies that I've seen recently, I believe this film to stand well above many of them. And there is so much enjoyment to be had that even with the narrative conflicts that I had with the story, I still believe it to be greater than the sum of its parts. And thus, it worked for me. And I found myself engaged, entertained throughout. And it is a recommendation for me overall. I am giving Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes 3.5 out of 5 stars here at the Beneverse Movie Channel. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more reviews. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.